want to spend just a minute telling you how I created this setup so that you can recreate something similar and paint from life in your own home. So the first thing I did was just start gathering things. I actually went to an antique store, which was like a field trip, and I found this little sheep, which unfortunately didn't make it into our still life, but just gathering things together, trying to figure out, a story. This is to be different for everybody, but meaning and a little bit of a narrative to this. So gathering things together that could go into still life, but then really analyzing them in their value, the local value, how light or dark are they? What color are they? Because I'm going to build a composition a little bit like I usually do in Photoshop or in my sketchbook. I'm actually going to take tangible objects and build a composition. So that's a good way to be thinking. If you get a bunch of dark things and you stack them together, it's going to be difficult to get an interesting value pattern, perhaps. So that was the first thing, just assembling the different parts of the composition or the different aspects that would become potentially the auditions. This was the auditions. Poor sheep didn't make it. And then after that, what I did was I just took this big cardboard box. You can see it over here. And I cut a hole in I cut out the bottom and then I cut a hole on one side to let in the light. And this is just to keep too much reflected light from bouncing back in and to give me some ability to choose my background. And this is right up against a north facing window. But if you have a north facing window, that's the best option if you're painting from life. If you don't have a north facing window, I would use some sort of artificial light, softbox if possible, because you want that diffused look. Ideally, a temporary setup by a north facing window. But anyway, this is what it looked like. And you can see the sheets of cardboard that I cut off on the left that are sort of leaning against that opening. That was just a way of controlling how much light was coming in. And that is how that sort of dramatic north daylight was accomplished just within this cardboard box. I do want to mention too that having chosen the objects, they're not all at the perfect angles. I had to play with them a lot. I actually put this Duplo, it's a big Lego, underneath the ornament, the big green ornament, to get it to lean. So that's one thing there. And you can totally, whatever you need to do in some sunflower paintings, I've used rubber bands to hold the sunflowers down on one end to get their pose to be correct. So lots of tweaking there. And then I just started taking pictures with my cell phone. So you can definitely use a sketchbook if you want to sketch. For me, because I was setting up the composition with the objects, made sense just to take pictures with the cell phone. I do want to say I was really zoomed out with my cell phone, like as zoomed out as I could be. So the pictures you can see, it's not very high quality. They were tiny, and then I cropped in. If you get close with your cell phone, right, you're going to get a lot of photo warp. So you want to be as far back with that cell phone as you can and then crop it smaller later within the phone. And yeah, this was one of the ideas. It wasn't quite working, right? I played with it a lot, trying to figure out how this goal could go, just moving things around. Again, just like you would in Photoshop or a sketchbook, composing these different elements. And I finally came up with the one that looked good to me, just sort of because now why did it look good, right? And it's not enough to just say, well, it looked good. Let me just talk about that for a second. It looked good because I have in this one a value pattern across, right? So that's one reason why it looked good. I loved the way the angel's wings curved in, right? They curved in, and let me do it this way. Yeah, they curved in. And also we have this big zigzag through the piece now. All those things that are just good composition, a really strong lead in back here, right? That was important too, right there. And some things that I'm about to talk about in the painting demonstration, we have the greens sort of dispersed throughout this composition. We have the reds dispersed throughout this composition. Obviously, it's a red-green harmony that I'm after here. And so this looked good. And so the next thing to do was to get my DSLR out and take the high-quality picture. And if you are going to take a picture, I hope you don't. I hope you actually paint. If you go to the trouble of setting up a still life, paint it from life. But maybe you can't, and you're in the same boat I am. Just take. You can see it was a long, long, a long shutter speed, and the aperture was as closed as I could possibly make it, f16 here. And the reason for that is I don't want any of that depth of field that's forced when you take a low aperture picture, right? For, if you're into cameras at all, you know that you get a really blurry background when you have a low aperture, and you get a much greater depth of field when you have a high aperture. So that's why it's all the way up to 16. That's as high as it'll go. And that meant that I had to compensate with the shutter speed so that there would be enough light to expose the picture. And that's why it's on a tripod, and it's also on a 2-second timer. So I can push the shutter down, and then, there's no finger shake when that picture actually takes. There's enough time to take a breath, and then the picture takes. Just want to make sure you don't bump the camera after that. Which results in our source for today. This was the source that I captured, and the thing that, again, was really important in this source more than anything else was the value pattern. I wanted to see that big zigzag through the piece. You can just see all these leading lines, the angel's wings, uh, just an interesting composition. So as you're setting up your still life, focus on the composition. You can use a viewfinder. You can look through, you can do this with your fingers, right? You can through like the little squares that you can make with your fingers. You can create a viewfinder. You can take pictures on your camera. You can create sketches, whatever works best for you, but composition is the thing. And then once you have that composition, making sure that the colors are composed, and of course it tells the story you want it to tell, um, which you are the only person that needs to know what that story is necessarily. You're ready to go. So I hope that's been helpful.